Have you ever, like, watched a movie where a supporting actor is just so incredibly intense that they accidentally break the entire narrative structure of the
Oh, well,
film?
all the time. It completely derails things, but in the best way.
Right. Well, welcome back to the deep dive, everyone. I hope you're all hanging in there, especially since it is Stress Awareness Month.
A very necessary month, honestly.
Seriously. I'm just hoping you aren't currently dealing with, like, some AI glazing boss forcing you to use Copilot for literally everything you do today.
Yeah, that's a very specific kind of modern stress, for sure.
It really is. But speaking of stress, today we're looking at a fascinating, almost structural phenomenon in cinema. And our core subject is Dane DeHaan, who is an incredibly talented actor, but let's be honest, he constantly looks stressed the hell out 24/7.
He really does. He perpetually looks like he's carrying the absolute weight of the world on his shoulders.
Exactly. And our goal today is to figure out what happens when a performer's sheer, undeniable gravity pulls all the oxygen right out of the room, like forcing the whole movie to just orbit around them instead of the main plot.
Yeah, and what's fascinating here is that this isn't about an actor lacking subtlety, or some ego-driven attempt to just steal the spotlight from the lead.
Right. It's not like he's mugging for the camera.
No, not at all. It's actually about his baseline assumption when he performs. He applies his considerable talents with this underlying, almost unconscious assumption that you, the audience, are there to watch him specifically, not the overarching story he's technically supposed to be supporting.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because I was trying to visualize the effect he has on a production, right? And casting him in a standard supporting role feels like, well, it's like dropping a massive, supercharged sports car engine into a standard golf cart.
That is a wildly accurate analogy.
Right, like the power is undeniable and thrilling to watch, but it actively threatens to tear the whole vehicle apart. The structure of a standard movie just wasn't built to handle that kind of torque.
Yeah, and you see this so clearly in his early defining roles. Like if you take a look at the movie Chronicle,
Oh man, Chronicle is such a good example of this.
it really is. I mean, it starts out as this very recognizable, almost lighthearted, found footage superhero movie. Three high school kids discover something in a cave. They get telekinetic powers. And for the first act, they're just messing around.
Pulling pranks in toy stores,
Mhm.
learning to fly. It's designed to feel very loose and fun.
Exactly. But DeHaan's character, Andrew, is the complete outlier. He's deeply isolated, dealing with a dying mother and an incredibly abusive father.
And what's so brilliant about the performance is that before the script even fully contextualizes Andrew's home life,
Hmm.
DeHaan is already communicating all that damage physically. Like, he plays the character completely from the inside out.
He does. He basically wears victimhood as a default physical state. If you look closely at the mechanics of his acting in those early scenes, he holds his shoulders way up by his ears.
Creating that defensive hunch?
Right. And he constantly averts his eyes, he looks at the floor, or like directly through the lens of the camera rather than at the person actually holding it. Plus, his voice rarely ever commits to full volume.
He's just a person trying to take up as little space as physically possible.
Exactly. And the way he handles the inevitable anger is what really makes it stick. In a standard high school movie, the bullied kid getting superpowers would have this sudden, massive gear shift.
Oh, yeah. They'd go from quiet to just screaming tyrannical rage in one scene.
Right. But DeHaan keeps the anger simmering just underneath the surface for the vast majority of the runtime.
Which is such a disciplined choice.
It is. Because he keeps that pressure contained, when it finally does break through, like in that terrifying hospital sequence or the final confrontation over Seattle, it carries the cumulative force of absolutely everything that preceded it.
It doesn't just read as a teenager throwing a supernatural tantrum.
No, it reads as a human being who has completely run out of alternatives.
And he remains so unsettlingly self-aware about his own collapse, too. Like, there's that famous monologue he gives to the camera where he declares himself an apex predator.
Oh, that scene is chilling.
Right. A lesser actor would have played that moment just to be scary, like the monster finally showing his teeth. But DeHaan plays it with this quiet lucidity. He knows exactly what his moral collapse looks like, and he's just calmly explaining his new reality.
And that lucidity makes the moment land as a recognizable tragedy rather than just a cheap jump scare. Because, making a monster frightening is fairly easy. Making a monster recognizable, making you see the human logic in their destruction is way harder.
Totally.
And he uses a very similar technique, but in a completely different social context in the film Kill Your Darlings.
Oh, switching gears to the 1940s. Right, so he plays Lucien Carr, the young man at the absolute center of the Beat Generation writers at Columbia University.
Yeah, guys like Allen Ginsberg and Jack Kerouac. And with Carr, you have a character who constructs his entire identity based purely on the effect he produces in other people.
He's kind of the literal definition of a social event horizon. Like, he doesn't actually write anything himself, he just inspires.
Exactly. And the specific acting instrument DeHaan uses here is just a masterclass in manipulation. He operates almost entirely in the gap between two highly contrasted states.
What do you mean by that?
Well, on one hand, he projects this intense magnetic presence. When he locks in on someone like Daniel Radcliffe's character, he makes that person feel like they're the only thing that matters in the whole world.
Oh, but then he pairs that with a sudden, devastating withdrawal.
Yes, and the mechanics of it are striking. He'll literally drop his chin, deaden his eyes, and physically recoil. His voice just drops into this flat, effectless monotone.
You can practically feel the temperature in the room plummet when he pulls his attention away.
And he sustains that ambiguity beautifully. The plot revolves around David Kammerer, an older man who is dangerously obsessed with Carr, and you're constantly forced to ask, is Lucien a tragic victim of stalking, or is he a cynical manipulator who engineered the whole thing for fun?
And DeHaan just refuses to give you the answer. He sits right in that uncomfortable middle.
Right up until the murder scene. Kammerer pushes too far and Carr kills him. In almost any other movie, a scene like that gives the audience some kind of catharsis.
Right, like a massive release of tension or a tearful breakdown.
But he plays the killing with zero relief. He executes the act as if it's simply a foregone conclusion, a decision already made, finally arriving at its execution. He doesn't ask for absolution or pity.
Just a man stepping one act further into the consequences he was always moving toward?
Exactly. Now, if his early roles are about characters manipulating the gravity around them, his subsequent roles explore the total opposite. They're masterclasses in portraying people losing their grip on that gravity.
Oh, wait, hold on. I want to push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because if you look at the middle of his career, we're talking about superhero sequels and gritty dramas, isn't he usually just playing the cliché troubled teen or edgy rich kid trope?
I see where you're coming from.
Like, we've seen a million young actors play the brooding guy in the corner. What makes his unraveling actually special or different?
That is a fair question, but the difference really lies in the architecture of how he loses control. Let's look at his role as Harry Osborn in The Amazing Spider-Man 2.
Okay, the Andrew Garfield sequel.
Right. First off, the sheer efficiency of his performance is staggering. In a massive, tonally messy blockbuster, he's given roughly 15 minutes of actual character focus.
Yeah, it was a very crowded movie.
Very. And in those 15 minutes, he manages to build a more compelling, tragic arc than James Franco achieved across 3 entire films playing the exact same character.
Wait, really? You're saying he outdid James Franco's entire 3-movie run in 15 minutes of a cluttered sequel?
I'm absolutely saying that.
That's a massive claim. Franco spent hours of screen time building up that betrayal and turning into the Green Goblin. How does DeHaan beat that with barely a fraction of the time?
Because Franco played Harry's descent as an emotional grudge, right? It was all about personal betrayal and teenage angst. DeHaan approaches it from a completely different, much colder angle.
Okay, how so?
He doesn't play Harry's extreme wealth and entitlement as a natural personality trait. He plays it as inherited behavior. Harry performs authority because it's the only relational mode his ruthless father ever modeled for him.
Oh, I see what you mean. So he acts like this seasoned CEO, but you can tell he's secretly just a terrified kid wearing a very expensive suit.
Precisely. He learned early on that projecting composure is a form of leverage. And the performance tracks what happens when that composure fundamentally stops working.
Right, because the script gives him a genetic terminal disease, which acts as the ultimate destabilizing variable.
Exactly. You cannot negotiate with biology. You can't buy off a genetic curse.
That context makes the scene where he confronts Peter Parker so much better. Like he needs Spider-Man's blood to cure himself.
Yes, and that scene is pitched perfectly between a cold business negotiation and a desperate plea. You can see the exact moment the CEO persona cracks, and he is barely managing not to literally beg on his knees.
Wow. And then you see a totally different flavor of this unspooling in a movie like The Place Beyond the Pines,
Oh, fantastic film.
where he plays Jason Glanton, this teenager, shaped by a profound, unnameable absence. For those who haven't seen it, Jason grows up without knowing his father, who is played by Ryan Gosling. And his father was killed by a rookie cop named Avery, played by Bradley Cooper.
Right, and Jason carries the absence of his father like a physical weight, but he doesn't even know what the weight is. He's a character entirely without orientation.
And the brilliance there is that DeHaan doesn't editorialize the trauma. He doesn't play Jason as aggressively acting out. He plays him as completely vacant.
He's a person with absolutely no usable narrative about himself.
Right. And all of that builds to this incredibly tense climactic scene in the woods. Jason finally kidnaps Avery, the cop who killed his dad. He has a gun. He has a legitimate grievance.
And as a viewer, you expect violence, or at least a massive emotional catharsis where Jason just screams and cries, demanding to know why his father had to die.
But instead, DeHaan plays the entire climax as this sudden, heavy deflation.
It's such a stunning, counterintuitive choice. Avery is the one who breaks down, apologizing and weeping. And as Jason watches the man who ruined his life cry, he realizes pulling the trigger won't actually resolve anything.
The logic of revenge is incomplete.
Exactly. It won't bring his father back, and it won't fill the void. So instead of screaming, he just sags. He takes Avery's wallet, leaves him alive, and later just mails him a photograph.
He reaches the end of his narrative, realizes it's a dead end, and just deflates.
Left to figure out what comes next with absolutely no framework.
Okay, so we've firmly established that his specific superpower, his instrument, if you will, is this incredible simmering interiority. But here's where it gets really interesting.
Okay.
Because to truly understand an actor's specific strengths, you have to look at what happens when they are forced to do the exact opposite.
Oh, yes. When a studio fundamentally misunderstands what makes an indie darling great and shoves them into a blockbuster framework.
Which brings us to the spectacular misfire of the 28th century. The film Valerian and the City of a Thousand Planets.
Oh, boy. Yeah, that's the one.
A $200 million intergalactic space opera. And DeHaan plays Valerian, this special operative who is written on the page to be a cocky, wisecracking hero.
Right. He's supposed to get by on effortless confidence, breezy banter, and pure surface-level charm. Think like Chris Pratt in Guardians of the Galaxy.
Or a young Harrison Ford. But it just didn't work. Why was it such a fundamental miscalculation?
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture of film acting, a character like Valerian requires an actor who generates presence through projection. They need to push their energy outward, filling the physical space with this buoyant, infectious energy.
But DeHaan generates presence through containment. He pulls energy inward.
Exactly. His entire instrument is tuned to suggest unresolved pressure underneath the surface. And Valerian, as a character, has absolutely no underneath.
Right. He's purely surface. He is exactly what he appears to be.
So when you put an actor built for deep containment into a role that is entirely externally oriented, that internal pressure has nowhere to go. And because he has nothing psychological to grip onto, the performance simply reads as effortful.
Yeah, when you are visibly trying very hard to play breezy, the charm just lands completely flat.
The banter lacks rhythm, the physical looseness isn't there because his body naturally wants to coil up, not open out.
It's the very definition of being miscast. Because in the few fleeting moments where the character actually has to carry genuine moral weight, he snaps into focus and handles it brilliantly.
But the moment the script asks him to be a fun space cop again, the illusion breaks. The role simply doesn't fit the toolset he brings to the table.
Which perfectly sets up our final point. Because following the misfire of Valerian, what happens when you take that exact same instrument, that deep containment, and place it in a vehicle perfectly designed for it?
You get the psychological meat grinder of Gothic horror, specifically A Cure for Wellness.
Man, this movie is a wild ride. It's the ultimate testing ground for his capabilities. He plays Lockhart, a young, ruthlessly ambitious corporate executive on Wall Street.
And Lockhart starts off as a deliberately unsympathetic protagonist. He's arrogant, he's transactional, and he believes every system has a hidden angle.
Every person has a price, right?
Exactly. But then he's sent to this remote Swiss wellness retreat to retrieve his missing CEO. And the genius of the film is that the retreat doesn't operate on Wall Street logic.
The whole movie functions as this elaborate mechanism designed to incrementally strip away every single piece of corporate armor he arrived with.
And the physical punishment is extensive. He's in a severe car crash, wakes up with a fractured leg, and is subjected to horrific disorienting treatments.
But what makes the performance so brilliant is how he reacts to it. as his body is literally deteriorating. He refuses to, like, beg the audience for pity.
Right. He treats a shattered leg and a forced medical imprisonment not as a terrifying ordeal, but simply as a deeply frustrating corporate obstacle.
Yes. He's hobbling around on crutches, demanding to speak to the manager of this cult, treating his pain like a delayed flight.
And that absolute refusal to soften the character is what keeps Lockhart's edge completely intact. It's a desperate recalibration of his worldview because his professional logic stops generating useful output.
And the horror works so beautifully because his fear is quiet and specific. It's not amplified genre hysteria, you know?
Yeah.
He's not screaming down the hallways.
Because the terror is so contained, you can feel the pressure building up inside him, making it feel far more credible.
Absolutely. So what does this all mean for you, the listener? I think there's a profound takeaway here, not just about cinema, but about how we categorize ourselves in the real world.
Oh, definitely. Hollywood constantly looks at an actor's exterior and ignores their actual instrument. And we do the exact same thing in our own careers.
Right. We all have specific natural instrument, a baseline way we operate. For some, it's deep interior focus and containment. For others, it's outward projecting charm.
And we thrive when our environment matches our natural instrument. But when we're forced to operate in a register that goes against our nature, we struggle.
We burn out because we're fighting our own structural gravity.
Exactly. To briefly synthesize what we've covered, the core takeaway from his career is the power of making people feel the weight of what you were carrying without ever putting it down long enough for them to see it clearly.
But perfectly said.
And quick side note, if you want to see this perfectly executed in a major lead role, you have to check out the show 000.
Oh, it's such a perfect vessel for him.
It really is. And this raises an important question to leave you with today. Think about a time in your life when you felt like you were failing or underperforming. Were you actually lacking capability? Or were you simply miscast in a role that required you to project outward when your true superpower is containing pressure inward?
Sometimes it's just a fundamental misunderstanding of what the engine was built to do. Keep that in mind as you navigate the rest of your week. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive, and we'll catch you on the next one.